Welcome back to Collecting Modern Classic Cars, and in this video I'm going to give you some driving impressions from behind the steering wheel of the Renault Safrane. It's probably important to understand where this car sits or sat in the motoring hierarchy, where its target market was. Back in 1998, this 2.5 RXE Executive Auto car would have cost around the £25,000 to £26,000 mark. It's probably the equivalent of, I'll post up on screen, I'll probably get this number wrong, but let's say that's the equivalent of about nearly £40,000 in today's money. So a reasonable investment, and the car was aimed really at the executive market, people who were looking at buying BMW 5 Series cars, a Mercedes E-Class, an Audi A6, to a degree the Jaguar XJ6. So that's where the car sat, and as such it needed to be spacious, daily driving material, it needed to be able to cruise the motorways well, needed to be quiet, comfortable, reliable and well built, because that's what the market expected, that's what people wanted when they bought one of these sorts of cars. And I have to say, Renault really delivered on that promise with the Safrane. The ride comfort is just sublime. If you were to blindfold yourself and drive down the road, which isn't to be recommended, you could easily convince yourself you're in something like a BMW 7 Series. And that's a car that of course would have been considerably more expensive. Everything in the car's nice and light and easy to use and just pleasant. Makes for a very comfortable and comforting driving experience. Of particular note are the seats. They are supremely comfortable and oh so soft. You sort of sit and squish into them. But don't think that they lack support, because they don't. There's plenty of support in them. It's just that because you sort of sink into the seat, you're sort of cocooned in them, if that's the right terminology. One thing not to fall into the trap of is just assuming that this is a large Renault Laguna, because it really isn't. This is a proper attempt by Renault to crack the executive car market. They didn't just enlarge on a Laguna, throw a bit of leather and wood at the interior and say job done. This is a thoroughly thought through product. It's a shame really that the car never sold as well as it perhaps should have, and perhaps as well as Renault engineered the car too. In France it was quite a popular car, the French being very loyal to anything built and designed in France. So Peugeot 605s, Renault Safranes, etc., Citroën XMs, Porsche Xantias did quite well. French also like practicality and ease of use. Quite unpretentious people, so things like a hatchback body, with folding rear seats, very light controls, a French badge on the front, all contributed well to sales figures there. Here in the UK, the executive market certainly prioritised other things, the badge on the nose and the tail being one of them. The Renault badge didn't really cut it. Corvette on the other side, don't know if you spotted that. And the hatchback. A hatchback in this UK, in this country, feels a bit family car as opposed to executive. Of course, things have changed now. Everyone's driving around in SUVs, and saloon car sales have dropped demonstrably. Not trying to suggest that the Safrane was ahead of its time. It was just a product of where it was designed, built, and where they thought the biggest sales market was going to be, i.e. domestically. But yeah, the hatchback design didn't help sales here in the UK. I suspect an awful lot of company car users who would have been the obvious target market for this sort of sector of car just never even bothered to try a Safrane. This particular example, ironically, was Renault Enfield's demonstrator. So those that did have a more open mind and lived in that neck of the woods might well have driven this car back in 1998 before it passed on to its first private owner. And it's a shame they didn't try, because they would have discovered a really good car. Perhaps, though, that would have presented them with something of a problem, of a dilemma, of a choice. Do I buy the car that actually suits the sort of driving that I do? Or do I buy the one with the fancy badge on front and back? Nowadays, of course, things have changed, and the car sits as a really nice, quirky, different, super rare, modern classic car. If you were to drive round in an Audi A6 of a similar period now, I don't think anyone would bat an eyelid. It's just old metal. Drive round in a Safrane, people are curious, they want to know why, how long you've had the car, and whether it's been restored. People ask you questions about it, they want to know, they want to talk to you about it, they want to photograph it and video it. A shrinking Violet, it's probably not the right car for you. The Safrane was effectively replaced by the Satis, another big Renault that didn't sell very well. Not helped by the fact that it was monumentally ugly. The Avon team being probably the high point, really. That was an absolutely cracking car, and one I'd more than happily add to the collecting modern classic cars stable as and when the right example comes up. Finding one of these cars these days is very, very difficult. They really don't come up very often. When they do, they tend to be cars that need quite a bit of work. There's usually no MOT, quite a bit of body damage, that sort of stuff. So project cars more than anything else. The problem, of course, is that they just don't sell for the sort of money that they sort of need to for anything other than the enthusiastic owners to invest in them. And any car at 20 to 25 years old needs money investing. The ride really smothers the harsher ridges and surfaces on the road. It leaves you of that, the car has very good body control, particularly for a car that's so softly sprung. So the car doesn't wallow or sort of drift around the road. It feels very planted. It isn't necessarily an easy thing to achieve with a car that's got such light fingertip types and steering and such a soft ride, but the Renault engineers achieved just that. The very comforting and pleasant driving experience is helped by the huge glass house of the car. This particular example has the optional electric glass sunroof, which also helps just to get some additional light into the cabin. But it feels very, very light and airy in here. It's very easy to see out of. There are no blind spots. You don't need blind spot monitoring cameras on a car like this. You can just see everything. At a steady cruise, you just don't hear the engine at all. When you press on, you can hear the 5 Series offbeat warble, which is quite a pleasant sound. It's very, very muted and calm in here. I'm hoping you can pick this up on camera, but it's also extremely quiet in as much as there are no rattles or untoward noises. Goes off to the Renault engineers that designed this car, because they have designed a rattle-free car. Not necessarily a given on a 1990s Renault. Noise suppression is also very good. The door seals don't feel quite as well insulated as the Lexus that we have. I mean, that's fair enough. That car's brief is all about being quiet. It was a considerably more expensive car as well. But Renault put plenty of sound deadening into one of these, into all of the Safranes. It did make them slightly heavy. That was the trade-off, which blunted performance a little. Although this 2.5 5-cylinder petrol example has ample performance. To give you an idea of just how quiet this car is at a cruise, at a 70 miles an hour constant speed on a smooth piece of motorway, the car emits between 67 and 69 decibels consistently. Our 325 CI Sport from 2003 emits late 70s, 78, 79, just about 80 decibels. So a drop of 10 decibels is quite a serious reduction in noise. You could almost hear a pin drop in here. Just as well, the cabin is so squeak and rattle free. Day-to-day practicalities are superb. This is a French car after all. The climate control system works very, very well. The whole engine, gearbox, steering package, very smooth, easy to use. Car feels planted. It's a very, very easy modern classic car to live with. The other thing is that sense of engineering quality and reliability. Any car can let you down ultimately, but you usually get a sense and a feeling of cars. Now, I can only speak for this example, but this one feels absolutely bulletproof. I know it's only done 42,000 miles, but nevertheless, most of the components are now 24 years old, and it just feels rock solid. This particular car been owned by the previous owner for nearly 20 years. When he stopped driving due to age and ill health, the car was effectively retired, but he didn't want to let it go, so it remained off-road, albeit at his home address down in London. It was then picked up by a classic car dealer down south, who just fancied the car as much as anything else, thought it was something a bit different. Why not? Life's too short not to try new things. And he completely recommissioned the car. So this example's had a new cam belt, water pump, new radiator, coolant flushed, brakes front and rear, new brake fluid, new tyres, anything complete, full service, anything the car needed, and many things that it didn't, it simply got. And then he used it himself alongside his own personal collection of cars, and also as a courtesy car for his classic car restoration business. So this car would be offered up to people who were having work done on their XYZ, and one particular customer really fell for the Safrane. It's a gentleman with a very, very nice Jaguar E-Type. Whenever the car came in for any sort of work, service work, whatever it might be, he always, as part of the deal, asked to use the Safrane for a couple of days as a courtesy car. And it's that sort of car. You may think, well, I've never thought about a Safrane, I never thought I'd want one. Then you start to think about it, starts to get under your skin. Drive it, and it will do more than that. Drive it and you might fall for it, I think is probably the right way of putting it. There's just something about them, and certainly something about an example as solid as this one. So running costs, day-to-day stuff, very reasonable. Car sits into the lower tax bracket. So what is that? Was that £305 a year or something in that sort of order? Classic insurance, next to nothing. Fuel, this car averages 27 to 28 miles to gallon on mixed driving. Does between 30 and 35 on a cruise, on a motorway cruise. Uses regular unleaded fuel. Don't need to put anything fancy in it. And that's it, you're up and running. Tyres aren't expensive, 195, 65, 15 tyres. So there's not much expense to go there. And it's the sort of car you can service at home. The engine bay is huge. The engine itself, not massive. I mean, this car will take a 3-litre twin-turbo V6 in the bi-turbo Bacara cars that were sold on the continent after all. So there's plenty of room to get your hands in there and remove spark plugs and oil filters, air filters and the like. So plug and play. What I would say, and I would never put anyone off from buying any Safrane, however, there is is a sweet spot in the range, and I do think that a 2.5 litre executive probably is that sweet spot. The engine's torquier and more powerful than the 2 litre 4-cylinder. It sounds better than the 4-cylinder engine, but it doesn't use much more fuel. At 27 to 28 to the gallon average, 30 to 35 miles per gallon on the motorway. This isn't a car that's expensive to run on fuel. The extra torque also helps you waft down the road. You never feel like you're having to work the car or the gearbox particularly hard. Very light throttle openings are all you need in day-to-day driving to sort of waft down the road. And the executive trim brings you things like soft plush leather seats. The cloth seats are very comfortable, but the cabin really misses some elegance and class, I suppose, if you have a car with cloth seats. So the bigger engine and the executive trim. A 3 litre V6 is also a very nice example if you can find one. I think at the last time of looking there were less than half a dozen of those left on the road, whereas there are 25 to 26 2.5 executive autos left. Doesn't make finding one very easy, but much easier than finding a 3 litre V6. Don't feel is the weight in the corners when you're cornering the car, despite the fact that it's very softly sprung. You don't get an awful lot of body roll, which is what you would expect from a car with this sort of spring rate. The body stays fairly flat and true, which is a benefit for your passengers. As the driver, you've got the steering wheel to hold on to, but you're a passenger in one of these soft squishy leather seats. You don't really want to get thrown around. Might sound an obvious point, but it is a front-wheel drive car. Whilst the handling wouldn't be described as sporty, it is very neutral. So even pressing on in the wet, there's a decent amount of grip. The car runs 195 section tyres all round. So it's not designed to be an Audi RS2 Quattro grip monster, but it holds on well. Grip wise, don't really know, I've never tried. It's not that sort of car. I mean, you could drive one of these cars in a sporting fashion. Just not sure why you would. Anyway, for the purposes of scientific experimentation, we'll give it a go around this roundabout down here. When it does start to let go, there's a really nice neutral balance. You don't feel like the car wants to understeer and push on. Braking performance is I say it's up to modern standards. Brand new cars these days have so many electric gizmos, it's untrue. This one really doesn't, but yeah, the brakes are strong, reassuring. There's a nice feel to the pedal. There's no dead spots. Doesn't have overly big brakes, but neither really does it need them. The engine on this car is lovely. Lovely and smooth, quiet and refined. Driving, you really don't need much throttle at all. The car will happily just waft along on light throttle openings, and you'll get where you need to go as quickly as you realistically need to get there. If you do want to give it a bit of a poke though, there is a sport button here on the side of the gear lever just here, which once pressed will engage sport mode. You can see on our dash we've got drive and S for sport mode. And now if we give the car a bit of a poke, you get a lovely 5-cylinder, that lovely sort of offbeat warble that you get with 5 and 10 cylinder engines. So it's not the fastest car in the world. I'll no doubt have to correct these numbers, but the 168 brake horsepower that this car produces, coupled with the automatic gearbox, means a 0 to 60 time of around 10 seconds, late 9 seconds to 10 seconds. It's perfectly adequate for day-to-day driving. You never feel like you're stressing the engine, even when you're revving it towards the red line. Lovely linear pull through the rev range. Top speed on one of these, I guess around the 130 miles an hour mark, maybe late 120s. It's completely missing the point of the car, but yeah, it will no doubt do it. So we are going to perform the world's clumsiest 0 to 60 miles an hour test at the traffic lights. I suspect it's going to make very poor video. But, as I say, in the interests of science, here we go. Oh, bit of wheel spin, yeah. Okay, attempt 2. So if that's a 0 to 60 time, an official 0 to 60 time of say 10 seconds, you really don't need much more than that. That's, yeah, that is very respectable performance. Although I'm not sure driving like that all the time in your 20-year-old Safrane is really cricket. Every now and again, to keep the car exercised and healthy is a good thing. Just chuck into this corner, it's a wet corner. Let's say that's ample grip. You may have noticed, but I like this car. seen it. I've not seen one on the road yet, but I reckon a really subtly modified Safrane would look amazing. I'm not talking about some chavtastic spoilers, body kit, etc. But if you look at a bi-turbo Baccara edition with a quite subtle sports body kit, the bigger alloy wheels, slightly lowered suspension, they look superb. I think one of these with a few subtle choice modifications could look seriously good. Personally, I'm going to leave this example just as it is, but you would be entirely forgiven if you wanted to gently modify your Safrane. Manoeuvring the car is quite easy as well. The car doesn't have rear parking sensors. Of course, you could fit aftermarket sensors or a rear camera if you wanted. But it is a relatively easy car to manoeuvre and park. I can see the corners of the bonnet from here. You can't see the boot, apart from the fact that this particular car has the factory fitted spoiler on the back. I think that came as part of the executive package actually on the car, which does help you to sort of see where the edge of the spoiler is and therefore where the boot ends effectively. If you didn't have that spoiler, then you can't see the bodywork out of the back window. Gosh, this thing's so comfortable to drive. I have found myself on more than one occasion gently lulling myself into a bit of a snooze on the motorway. The car's so quiet, it relaxes you. Every now and again, just open the windows or the sunroof, waking yourself up. I shall just pull over here and demonstrate the talking computer to you. It's one of the car's coolest features, I think. Here we go.
Driver's door not closed.
So he's going to bong at me about my seat belt. Let's see if he does that.
Watch out, your seatbelt is not fastened.
Can't imagine for a second that the French allowed that chap to speak to them in French. He sounds frightfully English. I also suspect that the French version was a bit more shouty. Sort of chap you could imagine him flailing his hands and arms around whilst he gave you warnings. Can't imagine what the Italian version was like then. Just want to talk value for money for a second. Just want to talk about value for money and usability for a second. Classic car market, the modern classic car market as well, it's very, very buoyant. If you have a budget of, say, £4,000 to £5,000, it'd be quite difficult to buy something that you'd be quite happy with, and certainly something that wasn't a project or needed lots and lots of money spending on it. But for that sort of budget, you'll buy a very nice Safrane. And the other reason that might make a good choice and a good buying decision. It's the fact that you'll just be able to use the car straight away. There'll be no long trips to the body shop, no welding of sills, no worrying whether the short MOT will cause the car to shortly be off the road. You'll just be able to get in and enjoy the car. And when we talk about enjoyment, you could do so much with one of these cars. If you wanted, it's a perfect daily driver, not a problem at all. You could use it for long cruises, you could do road trips in it, you could drive to France on holiday, fit the kids and all the luggage, etc. in it. You could take the car to car shows, take it, people won't have seen them before, or certainly the younger generations won't have seen them before. Other generations won't have seen one for so long. People will want to come up and talk to you about it. So I don't know too many cars, and I'm not saying there aren't others, because there are, but there aren't too many cars with a budget like that you could have all of that sort of experience. Daily driver, long distance cruiser, weekend toy, show car. Job done. And I think that makes them a really compelling purchase. There's also no particular hidden nasties, particularly on the facelift cars. This is a facelift car from 1998. The early cars did have a slight reputation for gearbox failure. To be fair, if the gearbox was likely to fail, it probably would have done it by now. But when the facelifted cars came out, they came out with updated engines. They also came out with better gearboxes. And there's nothing to fear from them. Yes, they run a cam belt, so that will need replacing every now and again. Arguably it's no different to a chain in some respects, where chains stretch or... So yeah, they're a worry-free purchase as well. I mean, everything on this car works, and I mean everything. The talking computer works.
Welcome. The vehicle computer is now checking systems for you,
which is achingly retro cool. The cruise control works, the climate control works perfectly. The windows, the electric sunroof, central locking, you just get a sense that it will continue to do that. I'm not sure you get that from some of its peers. So hopefully this video has given you a good idea of what a Safrane is like to drive. You will have realised that I really do like these cars. I've got a lot of time for them, a lot of respect. I've driven an awful lot of cars over the years. Most of them tend not to surprise me. They sort of end up being pretty much as I'd expect, but this one has been a real surprise, a real pleasant surprise. And I look forward to every drive in it. And when you think about just how undervalued the cars are, that's pretty impressive in my book. So thank you for watching and supporting the channel, and I will look forward to providing more content on modern classic cars in the very near future. So please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.